Hi everybody, it's Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Hallmark Plus More, where we watch and talk about shows, movies, mysteries, Hallmark ornaments, and anything else that floats our boat. So today we're going to be reviewing NCIS Origins, Season 1, Episode 5. It airs on CBS, starring Austin Stowell as a young Leroy Jethro Gibbs. So this episode was a little different, right? It starts out with the flashback of a young Gibbs and Mark Harmon narrating, talking about in the tunnel, and he is what it looks like is in a coma or unconscious. And the flashback goes right back to what happens as soon as he hears about his wife and daughter. So I definitely think that was interesting because if you're a fan of the regular NCIS, as I am, of course, 22 plus years it's on, you kind of know that he found out about his wife and daughter while he was away in the military, but you don't really see a flashback of when he actually is told the news. So the beginning of this episode, it shows like him being told, and you kind of see his raw reaction, right? Basically, this is a young man who has a wife and daughter. He's just found out that, he's basically alone. His family is gone. So it is a lot to take for sure. Definitely a shock. And then right after he's told the news, his camp is hit, right? He's attacked. So everybody's hitting deck, everybody's getting down, and he's kind of just hit by this news, like, my family is gone. I'm all alone. And you see what happens in those next few minutes, right? So basically, he's fighting the war and they were attacked, their camp, and he walks out, right? In essence, to be hit. It's almost like, my life is over, my family's gone, basically walking out to be killed, which definitely sets you back because it's the beginning of the episode and you're like, whoa, this is brand new information, right? Because like I said, in the 22 years of NCIS with the adult Gibbs, you don't really know. He doesn't talk about it. He's quiet. He doesn't talk about, what happened after he found out about his family. So this is kind of new for NCIS fans. Like, oh, we're getting a glimpse of what really went on. And it's scary, right? When you see Jackson, his dad, say to the doctor, like, what happened to him? Did he go out and try to save one of his men and was hit? And the doctor basically had to tell Jackson, like, no, he wasn't trying to save anybody. He was basically just walking out to be hit. And I think that took Jackson back, of course. He knows his son just lost his family. And that's just hard to hear, when you lose family members. And then, that was his first gut reaction, was as soon as he was told his camp got hit and he's just walking out to be killed. So definitely new information. Like I say, if you're a longtime NCIS fan, you didn't know his reaction right after he was told his family was killed. So, it's always nice to watch NCIS Origins and try to get more insight into, how the adult Gibbs had his early years. So that was kind of that backstory and Mark Harmon narrating it. And then you get into kind of the heart of this episode, which is definitely interesting, right? It starts out about them talking about a professor of theology who committed a double homicide. He killed his wife and I guess the wife's lover. He comes home to find his wife in bed with another man who is in the military, Captain Rice. That's how NIS got the case, because the person that she was sleeping with was in the military. And then he basically loses it. He kills them with just a pen. So he flips out and kills both of them in bed there. And from the crime scene photos, you see there's blood everywhere. Another thing that you find out is that Frank's female partner at the time basically quit being his partner a week before this case. So Frank's 6 years ago, this happened 6 years ago, Frank's is doing the case all by himself. So he's got this double homicide, brutal, of this, theologian or this professor of theology, religion, doing this crime, and he does give up where he buried Captain Rice, but he refuses to let anybody know where he buried his wife. So you find out that the wife had a sister, Julie, and she wants that closure, right? And this man is going to be executed in 2 days. So obviously you see the urgency of that. He's going to be killed in 2 days. And the sister, the family, they want that closure. They want a funeral. They want to know, where their family member was buried. And he's just not giving it up. The professor refuses to say where he buried his wife, only where he buried, Captain Rice. And you see flashbacks from 6 years ago. This case took Frank's hard. He loses his temper. He even says, at one point, he's choking him. Tell me where you buried your wife. They want closure. And he just refuses. So you can tell he's really smug. And Frank's is like, look, this tore me up. He's getting executed in 2 days. It's a lost cause. He refuses to tell us. And the sister is like, Frank's, I need that closure. We have 2 days. We have to go back to the prison and see what we can do. And so this is a really hard case for Frank's. One, because he had to do it alone. He had no partner. And two, he made a promise to the sister. So this has kind of been like, one of those cases that really gets him, because he made that promise 6 years ago and he couldn't deliver. He promised Julie, the sister of the deceased, I will give you that closure. I will find out where she's buried. I will bring you the body. And he hasn't been able to deliver. So, you kind of see the softer side of Frank's, because you can see how much that bothered him, as a human being. And he really just wanted to get that closure. But at the same time, this case tore him up. He tried everything. Like I said, he was physical with them, and he's just a smug, kind of SOB who won't tell him. So you kind of follow that. Now he's not by himself. Obviously, he has a team around him. Randy, Layla, and Gibbs are trying to help him with the case. But yeah, this is a difficult one for Franks, because he does still want to give Julie the closure, but he just knows, he's like, I can go back to the prison, but he didn't tell me 6 years ago. I've tried every tactic I can. And he's just smug and won't do it. So just let him die is basically what Franks is saying. Like, I give up. But Julie, kind of gets to him, because Franks, still had that promise, and he still wants to deliver on that promise. Like I said, kind of shows a soft side of Franks. So, in the end, he says, I want to talk to Julie. I'll tell you where she's buried. So I was kind of like, okay. I'm not really buying it, because I think he's kind of smug, and I didn't care for him at all. And he wrote a book. I don't know if I mentioned that, but he wrote a book about theology. And Franks read it. And Franks isn't a religious person, but he read it 6 years ago. He put notes in the margin, anything that he could do to kind of get in the mind of this professor to kind of find out where he buried his wife. And, so obviously he's got a team now. So Randy is reading the book and trying to kind of read the notes from Franks and try to figure if there's anything that they miss. Layla's going over the crime scene photos. And so basically they're like, all right, fine. We're going to have a ton of marshals, a ton of police. We'll take, we'll do his arrangement. Julie agreed to it. She wants that closure, find out where her sister's buried. So he takes them to the desert, because he buried both of them in the desert. Layla and Gibbs hang back, and they're kind of like off to the side, and they have their own little altercation, which I think, shows a lot about Gibbs too. He had a little altercation with somebody driving, had nothing to do with the case, but him and Layla had words there with the gentleman in the car. And later you talk about that. Layla and Gibbs kind of talk that out. But the professor tells them, this is where I buried my wife, and they start digging and they find a body. But there's just something that was telling me, like, no, that was too easy. And when they find the body, they're like, oh, there's stones underneath the body so that the body's not touching the dirt. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but that means something. And I don't see that as the wife. So it turns out it wasn't the wife. He confesses to a priest during confession. He confesses, hey, that wasn't my wife. I led them to another body. And he confesses who it was. Apparently, when he went out to bury the bodies, he saw a bystander, and he thinks he saw too much. So he just kills him right there and buries him too. But before he kills him, he asks what religion he was. So they're finding a piece to the puzzle. Like, yes, he might be a little insane because he's killing people. But before he killed this innocent bystander, he wanted to know what his religion was so that he could bury him, as a ritual for that religion, in respect of that religion. So I was like, okay, this is meaning something. This is going to help find the wife's body. The sister confirmed the wife didn't have a specific religion. She didn't have a certain God that she prayed to. But I just knew that was a clue, you know what I mean? Because he did the same thing with Captain Rice. Captain Rice was Catholic. He buried them, with the ritual of being Catholic. He did the same thing with this man. So in the end, you know what I mean? He wanted to talk to Julie, and he said again, I will tell Julie. So Franks doesn't believe him, but Julie is desperate, right? Now he's got like 12 hours to live or whatever. And so the sister goes and sees him. And the sister goes, I believe you. You want me to forgive you. I forgive you. Now, where did you bury her? And he was like, oh, I didn't want you to forgive me. I want to forgive you. You're the one who drove her to the bar. You're the reason she started drinking that fancy wine. And I was like, wow, you know what I mean? This woman has suffered enough. And then in your final hours, you're blaming her. He was like, I forgive you. You killed your sister. You're the one who drove her to the bar. You're the one who was with her when she was drinking with this guy. You know what I mean? And I was like, wow. And he also confessed that she was drunk when he killed him. And I don't think we knew that previously. Obviously, we didn't have the wife's body, so there was no way to test, to see if she was intoxicated. But the professor was like, look, when I found her, she was drunk. She was in bed with this man. She was drunk on that fancy wine. And you're the reason she did that. So I feel like, the professor is still a smug SOB and basically blaming the sister for her death, which kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I was like, I really don't like this man. But all of the wheels were turning for Franks, and Franks was like, wait a second, let's read that last chapter. So even though she wasn't in a religion, he was saying alcohol was her religion. And I was like, yes, let's look at the desert. And Franks finds that there's a vineyard on the desert, and that's where he buried her. So you see him lying on the gurney, right? I mean, they're putting the drugs in him. He's got probably a minute to live. And you see Franks running, and I'm like, go, 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 right? Because I want Franks to get to him in time. I know the professor's dying, with lethal injection, but I want him to know before he dies that Franks figured it out, and we know where you buried your wife. Like, I just feel like as smug as he was, you kind of just want to, like, stick it to him, we know, right? So I love that. He's getting injected, he's got like 30 seconds to live, and Frank's is like, I know you buried, you said wine was her religion, and I know where you buried her, you know what I mean? And then the last scene is the funeral for her, and you see Frank's hug Julie, and I just think that's a very touching moment. You kind of find out that she's a twin, so you don't know that at the beginning, but when you see Julie talk with Franks and he shows her that necklace. This is a necklace that they got when they were 16, and it's one of those little hearts where it's broken, and each sister or each friend has a piece of that heart, to make it a whole heart. And she just has that half, you know what I mean? Because she said her twin sister always wore it around her neck. So, I mean, that was just, something precious. Like, hey, you know what I mean? This is something that I want to recover, or this means something to me. So that last scene where Gibbs is at the funeral and he gives Julie, you know what I mean, the other piece of that necklace, because they were able to find the body and she has a proper burial, and there they are at the funeral. It's just a touching moment because everybody needs closure. Everybody, whether you've lost a loved one, even if there's still a cold case, you still have to have that closure. So I love that the family got that. It's so sad to lose a family member, but to not know what happened to them, or to know that somebody knows, to live 6 years knowing that, you know what I mean, your sister's husband killed her and he refuses to tell you where she's buried. I mean, that just sits with you. So I love that the episode ended with that closure. And it shows that sweet part of Frank's, you know what I mean, that he does have that soft side. And speaking of Frank's, I also love that there was a little dialogue conversation between Tish and Frank's, right? Because he's so straught up with this. And he says to Tish, like, hey, this is none of your concern. And she was like, yeah, it is. It's been eating at you. You're in my house. This affects me. And why are you so, obsessed with this case? Did you sleep with Julie? Do you have like this relationship with the sister? And Franks was like, no, it wasn't like that at all. I gave my promise. And, and I think that was important. Because when you're dating somebody, living with somebody, have a relationship, and you see that they're very concerned about a certain person or a certain case, that's where your mind goes. Like, why is he so concerned with Julie? Was he sleeping with her? So I feel like even though you might think, oh, that was insensitive of Tish to say that, that's a thought, right? We all have those thoughts. And I think it was important for her to have that conversation with Franks, and for her, like, hey, I need to know that Franks wasn't involved with her because he has this emotional connection with her. And I think it's just he wanted to close the case. So I think that's important that they show these relationship kind of dialogues. And I think that was important for Franks and Tish. So I like that they showed that. And then, of course, I also like the dialogue that you see between Gibbs and Layla, where he kind of lets her in. Like, look, the reason why I got so upset with those men in the car at the gravesite in the desert was because of this. And he kind of opened up about fishing, and you kind of see that's why he enjoys fishing. That was his outlet. That was something his dad showed him to deal with pain and loss, because he really loved that dog that died when he was younger, and that's how he dealt with it. So I feel like that was another little nugget of insight that you find out on why the adult Gibbs really enjoys fishing and why that's such an outlet for him. So Layla's like, hey, go fishing once a week. If you need that outlet, do it. So I like that. I feel like he kind of opened up a little bit to Layla and explained why he acted that way. Because in Layla's defense, like, look, you flipped out. Like, you need to just calm down. And the fact that Gibbs opened up a little bit on why, I think was really good for him, because it let Layla think, okay, you're not just crazy. Not that she thought he was crazy, but, our actions usually have emotions behind it, and there's a reason. Not everybody is just hot-tempered and just flips out all the time. I mean, obviously, he had that reaction because of that. And I feel like it was nice that Layla now understands a little bit more about Gibbs. So all in all, I thought it was a great episode. I hope you enjoyed watching it, reviewing it. And thank you for everybody who watches my videos and subscribes. I appreciate you so much. And I look forward to watching and discussing the next episode. So until then, bye.